All right, so I'm going to get us started. Our first set of presenters are going to be presenting on the overview of early childhood PBIS, Voices from the Field. We have Stacy Reed, Courtney Last, and Michelle McQueen. So if you wouldn't mind giving them a round of applause, they're going to get started.
Well, good morning. Can everybody hear me? So I am Michelle McQueen, and I'm so lucky to present with two people that I supported as they implemented this work we're going to talk about today. So Courtney Last, if you would come on up, and Stacy Reed, come on up. These are implementers in the field, so you'll see in the title it says Voices from the Field. So what they're implementing has been research-based, but our presentation today is going to share with you what does that look like for practical application. Like, how did we really do this in Michigan's context in GSRP classrooms over the last 2 years? So as we get started, we do have notes. We have slides that show very systematic, planful ways we did this, but we also want to be really responsive to you to let you know, like, how did this happen? What was the reason behind what we did to implement? And then what does that look like when we go all the way down to classroom working with children and families? So I do see some familiar faces. I've been mostly on Zoom, seems like, for 4 years. So some of you, I'm like, I think I know that person, but they're not in a screen, so I'm not sure. Like, I see somebody over here, they're smiling at me. I think, yeah, yep, we do know each other, but we just look a little different. So with that, we wanted to get started this morning by seeing who's in the room with us. So maybe when we speak, we can share things that might be important to your context or your work. So we wanted to see who's with us. Any classroom teachers today? Few? Welcome. Administrators for early childhood or elementary? Few of those too. Any coaches, ECSs, behavior coaches, classroom coaches? A couple there. Behavioral specialists? Yeah, we just have a couple of everybody. Other people, who else is with us out there? Social workers? Yeah, a couple. I see some staff members of mine, so the MiMTSS TA Center, and then I welcome Mark and Janet. I see some familiar people like state level or TA. So we'll welcome everybody. We're excited to kick off our early childhood part today. It is an overview of early childhood positive behavior intervention supports. We want to acknowledge as we get started, the information that you're going to hear about comes from a couple sources. It comes from the National Center of Pyramid Model Innovations. We partnered with them as a state to go through this training. And so Monroe ISD was a partner, and that's what you're going to be hearing about today. Courtney and Stacy's going to share what did that implementation look like at one of their elementary buildings that houses their GSRP classrooms in Monroe County. We also want to acknowledge not only Monroe ISD, but some of our other partners. We had other ISDs and districts the last few years help us implement in Michigan and begin to learn that context. I almost forgot to use the clicker. So you're going to see right there, we want to acknowledge those folks. And then as we move ahead with our time this morning, we have some group expectations really to be responsible. If you have those questions when we get to question time, certainly feel free to actively participate and come up to the stands and ask them. And then being respectful, just if you have a question, if you want to hold off and wait towards the end, we have identified some time to answer those as well. We do have at the end of a session an opportunity for you to give us feedback. The TA Center really takes your feedback and tries to make improvements. So you're going to see information on how you can give us more information on this session's feedback on how you identified as a participant. And then today's purpose, we really want to talk about when we say early childhood PBIS, like what is that system work? What is the data? What is the practice pieces that went into making this work? So you're going to hear about that. And then within the 75 minutes, which I assured both of these ladies is going to go really fast for the last 2 years of work that we want to present, we really want to make sure that you understand that implementation process they went through for early childhood PBIS, and then looking at the systems, practices, and data pieces and how they were implemented. So this is what you're going to see. You're going to see like an intro to the implementation. You're going to see us break down what it took to build up systems, the practices that were implemented, and then what are the data tools and pieces that we used for this early childhood piece. So with that being said, we're going to get started with our first section. And so Stacy and Courtney, feel free to jump in if there's anything you would like to say as we go. But this is a graphic that really depicts the MTSS for early childhood. So when you see this, we're going to be talking about birth through age 5, multi-tiered systems of support. So you're going to see both systems, practices, and data, as you can see in this diagram, how they all intersect around equity. And so we're really looking for each and every child to have access as we implement positive behavior interventions. So we're looking at that social and emotional competency. And so when we think about supporting behavior, we have to think about supporting both staff and children and their family. And we're always looking at using those 3 pieces that intersect to lead to child outcomes. So that's our goal, is that we want to arrive with social competence, and which is connected to academic success as well. And this is one of the ways that we do this. We use the pyramid model practices. And here you're seeing the pyramid, which the bottom is resting on a strong workforce. And then each of the other levels is supporting that building of competence for children. So you see the universal promotion for all. If you have PBIS, and maybe a sister or partnering school, if you're in early childhood, your elementary might be implementing PBIS, and so you might be familiar with the triangle and the different tiers. This just points out that we're doing promotion strategies on that universal tier, that aqua, and it's looking at high quality classroom environments, and then nurturing and responsive relationships. So that is something that all children get. It's best practices. Our early childhood programs in Michigan are very familiar with that. And then when we move up that tiered system, you're seeing in the green, some children might need additional support. They might need embedded opportunities to interact socially and emotionally with other children. And so we're targeting specific skills that maybe a few children or some children in the classroom might need, and we're making sure they have lots of naturalistic opportunities to do that. So we're doing that planfully. And at the very top, we have a few children that maybe when we've done all this, they still may not respond, and you might still see some challenging behavior. And so for those children, we're really looking at providing an individual intervention plan. So what might they need as far as support in order to be successful in that classroom? And so all three of these tiers, all these practices are meant to work together in order to create that birth to age 5 MTSS system. And I just want to point out that this is a framework, so any curriculum that's being utilized in early childhood can use this system because it's a framework. It's not a program and it's not a curriculum. And so this is a piece we want to stress too. A lot of people are familiar with the pyramid model. A lot of folks have been implementing practices of the pyramid model. And so today you're going to hear about those practices. Stacy's going to share what did that look like being implemented in the classroom. But we are going to show you how we refer to it as early childhood PBIS or program-wide pyramid model because we are implementing practices as well as we're showing you how we built the infrastructure to support classrooms, to support children with whatever their needs are socially and emotionally so they can be successful. And then as we do this, it's really all about that systems work to get started with the leadership team. So you can see here, it's showing seven different components. And the first one is a leadership team. And they're really committed to implementing these things that are supportive for staff and children and family in order to have strong classrooms that support social and emotional skill development and competency. So you're seeing staff buy-in. Most everybody here has been through an initiative, which maybe as a staff member you weren't considered. Maybe it was just you were told that we were going to do this. And so when we look at early childhood and the supports for PBIS, we really want to have staff buy-in. So we're thinking about the why. What does that mean for staff as they make changes to what they do? Then we're looking at family engagement because we recognize families are their first and forever teachers. So how do we make sure that families are brought in and work with us as we try to build skills? We're looking at program-wide expectations. We want everybody to be speaking the same language, and we want children to know what to do. We want staff to know what to do as far as what behavior is expected. We in Michigan and across the nation can acknowledge that challenging behavior seems to be on the rise for our littles. And so we also have a slice that's called procedures for responding to challenging behavior. And so we're looking at how do we build a system so down to the classroom level, staff know how to reach out for additional support. Families can get additional support. We're looking at continuous professional development and coaching. So like, how do we make sure that we build that effective bottom layer of that pyramid you saw on the previous slide? We want to make sure that we're preparing staff so that they can do these things. And then with any good implementation, we've got to look at our data. Is it working? Is what we've been putting our efforts towards making a difference for children? Is the implementation as intended, or is it with fidelity? And then our whole goal for this model is we really just want to make sure that we're ensuring that every child, so we're looking no matter if they come to us with challenging behavior, that they have support to have positive experiences, and that we're seeing success and they're thriving in their behavior or their social and emotional development. So that's our goal with this, is we're really supporting adult change, but the goal is that it impacts children. And so why we've decided to do early childhood PBIS is that it's been shown to improve those skills we want to increase for social emotional, and that we want to build the tool belts of teachers. We want them to have strategies in order to respond to those. So you probably, all in this audience, even though you have various roles, have encountered children with challenging behavior, and you've left exhausted and maybe with a little more problem solving on your mind. And so we want to make sure that we're effectively preparing staff to respond so that children are also having readiness skills as they move on to kindergarten. And what we know is if teachers are better prepared for those kiddos, because it only can take one kiddo to make you exhausted at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the year, where you question, like, is this something I'm going to do long term? And so having these skills really helps us keep teacher staff retention. So we're excited about that. I'm seeing more people that I know, so I'm very, very excited. And then we use that term high fidelity implementation is from the TA Center's perspective. So I work with Melissa, who introduced you, and so we really want to make sure if we're supporting folks like Stacy and Courtney that we're implementing in a way that it was intended. So we use that word fidelity and we check that because we know if we do it the way it was intended, everybody's going to have positive outcomes. So we check in. Did we do what we should? Is behavior adults changing so that outcomes for kiddos change? And so this is what we have found is that this implementation gets us there. And I promise you're going to hear from Stacy and Courtney about what does that look like real soon. But we just wanted to give you a moment. We know we have 75 minutes, not a lot of time, but we want you to take a moment. We're going to do this throughout the presentation where you just pause and try to connect what I've been saying so that you could finish these statements. Like, I appreciate hearing about early childhood PBIS because, or implementing early childhood PBIS would be beneficial, like in your context, because. So just a few seconds to kind of connect to where you're coming from. And a lot of people might be thinking, because at their site or who they work with, like, you do have that challenging behavior I've alluded to. So hopefully you've made some connections back to your context, like how that could support you. But we want to move into, like, how does systems, how does data really help build this workforce? And you see it really strongly on the bottom. And the implementers behind me, and I see some out in the audience, they will tell you, like, this has been very laborious for training for staff. And I think their staff would say it's been very rewarding because it leaves them with skills that they can use right away with children, and it comes together with what they already know from the programs that they're implementing and is very complementary. And so here it just showcases that outcomes benefit just not the children, but teachers. Teachers are seeing benefits from implementing. It's building their capacity to support social and emotional learning of children. It's building outcomes for children because we're seeing reduction of that persistent, challenging behavior when it's implemented with fidelity. And then families are having an opportunity to really team with the school setting when we're looking at those interventions, and even just increasing, like, how do they know what to do at home? Like, why would routines and schedules be so important in the home too? right? So we've been able to support what's happening in the classroom and make sure it's available for families too, so that they're seeing outcomes as well. And now we're going to kind of move into that systems piece. And when we get into that systems, Courtney's going to talk from her role as the lead for the leadership team. She's now going to be system coaching this coming year. And so she's been kind of at the point for helping develop all these systems you're going to hear about. So we've worked closely together, and she can talk about what does this look like for her in her role at Monroe ISD.
Thanks. So I'm Courtney Last. I really hate talking into a microphone, so I'll try my best. I am the GSRP director in Monroe County, and I remember when we got the call to apply for this process. I think it was the first summer that COVID started. We were thinking about planning what our next year would be, and my superintendent said, you should do this too. I'm like, okay, we're gonna do this too. So we started on our road, we applied for the project, and we ended up getting it because I feel like it was because we had a lot of it already in place. These are some of the components of the EC-PBIS. The infrastructure, and I'll talk a little bit more in depth. So the first one is establishing a leadership team, making sure you have buy-in, family engagement, having program-wide expectations, a strong PD plan to develop staff, and procedures to respond to children with challenging behaviors, and then looking at the data to determine your fidelity and what happens next. We're going to give you another opportunity to kind of think about what you might already have in place moving forward. For us in RISD, we do everything together. The GSRP program, all of our classrooms, we are the delegate for Head Start, and ECSE, we do everything together. So this was just kind of like a baby step towards implementation. We also had program-wide expectations already in place, which was a big piece of it. But thinking about where you're at, how do you feel? Just take a few minutes to think about that. How long is it? Second. All right. Whoa, buddy. Sorry. Okay. So the first thing that you need to do is develop a leadership team, a group of people who are committed to moving the process forward. You really need to think about who you want at the table when making decisions about what this is going to look like in your community. We have monthly meetings with the leadership team and Michelle for the last 2 years as she kind of guided us through this process to look at the data. We create an implementation plan with steps that we want, like action steps that we want to move forward on. We talk about how to communicate what we're doing to other stakeholders within the ISD and our local school districts. And we are always looking at implementation through a lens of equity. And then we think about planning for behavior challenges. That's really where a lot of our focus has been at the leadership team this year. So in our ISD, we had our early childhood director sat on the team as the administrator. She was thinking, ultimately in charge of any fiscal decisions, schedule making, things like that. I was also a part of it. We had two teacher leaders this year, because this year we took on a second site, so we now have 5 ISD-operated GSRP classrooms using this process. So we had 2 teachers. The family member has been really hard for us is to get on board for IISD coming out of COVID and just the rotating door of GSRP families, right? So that's been a tricky part for us. We have 1 behavior coach that sits on our leadership team and 1 school social worker. They both support different locations. We also have a huge commitment in our ISD to inclusion. So we had 2 special ed inclusion teachers also sit on our leadership team. And then you have to have somebody that fulfills the role of the data coordinator to kind of keep track and compile all of the data that comes through. Michelle worked with us as our leadership team coach for the first 2 years of the model demo practice or process, but moving forward, I'm going to take over that role in our ISD. And then we have a classroom coach, which would be the ECS for GSRP. So we have 2 ECSs that have also been trained in all of the pyramid model practices. And that is just what I said, sorry. The next piece of it is staff buy-in. So we really wanted to make sure throughout this whole process that we were kind of keeping the temperature on how staff were feeling about it. So every time the teachers would take a training, like the big pyramid model training, which is 5 sessions long, we would kind of check in afterwards, like, how are you feeling? Do you feel this is gonna be beneficial to your work? And then we tried to do like a pre and post. We surveyed them a couple times a year. Stacy and our other ECS, Chrissy, did a really good job of like keeping the temperature on their stress level and how they were feeling about implementation throughout. So that's how we kind of kept an eye on staff buy-in, was mostly through surveys. The next big piece is family involvement. Making sure that you have like a family's voice and what you're doing in your class or within your programs. We're looking at using our Great Start Collaborative Parent Liaison more next year because it has been really tough to get somebody like a parent from the classrooms to be a part of it, but since she's already like an employee, she might be more willing to do it, so that's what we're hoping. And then looking at different ways to involve families by even reviewing materials, maybe not coming to our meetings, but doing other things with like as a subcommittee to plan things moving forward. So that's kind of how we're going to look at increasing family involvement. These are some examples of family nights that have happened across the state. I don't want to take credit for any of the other demo sites locations, but they did, one of the locations, do you remember which one, did the Tucker the Turtle night?
So we have had, I'm looking at you, Allison, like 8 model demos? 8 model demos across the state. So Monroe is one. So you're going to see pictures throughout this that might have some of other people's pictures or photos up there.
Right. So one of the sites hosted a Tucker the Turtle night, and that's how, if you're not familiar with Tucker the Turtle, it's really a self-regulation process for kids. So they even found a life-size turtle mascot, which is crazy, to come, and they had all the families come. They made puppets, and every family got a copy of the workbook. We at our ISD did a social emotional learning day this year where we invited all of our classrooms or all of our parents to come, where they made self-regulation bottles, different things, and we talked about a lot of the pyramid model practices at the social emotional night. Another thing that we use to connect with families is by sharing newsletters and what's called backpack connections, which you can find on the Challenging Behavior website on pretty much any topic you could possibly want to share with families, whether it's about making transitions smoother, biting. There's lots of things that you can find on the website to share with families to help connect with what you're doing in the classroom to the home life. The next piece of it is creating program-wide expectations. We were lucky coming into this process because we already had program-wide expectations set for our county. We decided almost 10 years ago that we needed common expectations between locations. We have 38 classrooms in our county. Staff go between all of them because we have lots of itinerant staff. Just staff moving to different locations for vacancies. And we also have children that often go to 2 or more programs a year because of just the nature of the population that we serve. So the transient population, it's helpful if they have something solid in every room that they go to that they can kind of learn from and build on. They're always going to hear that you need to be safe, to be kind, and be a good listener, regardless of what preschool classroom you're in our county. Just some things to keep in mind is that things need to be stated positively and posted throughout the building. We share a lot of spaces within elementary programs, and it's even helpful for the big kids to see these posters in the hallway because it helps them remember what they should be doing and how they can help support the little kids, because some of our elementary schools in Monroe County go up to 6th grade in some locations. So it's really helpful for the 6th graders to remember how to be kind and how that looks when you're in front of a 3 or 4-year-old. This is where we started. This is really small, but we started by creating a matrix to create the rules that went along with the expectations. So what does being safe look like on the bus? What does being safe look like on the playground? What about at large group? What about at small group? So we had a committee work on this to help develop it before we rolled it out countywide. Okay, so I'll give you a chance to think about and reflect about the program-wide expectations and rules. Just thinking about if this is something you already have or one way you can strengthen this at your location. See, I'm talking too fast. Oh, Allison said we should talk at our tables. So if you want to talk at your tables, we can take a few minutes to do that. So do you want me to give them a second to share at this one?
You could just show hands how many people have expectations.
Am I talking too fast?
So we're going to call you back together real quick. Give you 30 seconds to finish up your conversation. We're hearing some great conversations out there, and we know having expectations and rules and agreements that support them are really super important and essential for classrooms. We're just wondering, with the raise of hands, how many people have expectations already at their sites or the sites they support? Just with the raise of hands. So a few. Yeah. That's really, Monroe started out with theirs, but I just want to normalize. Most of our sites start without them unless they use the C4L curriculum that does have some expectations. But it's pretty normal for sites to get started, and then they decide, like, what makes sense for our context, and then they have staff and families weigh in to provide their voice on what does that look like in their community. So we're still getting used to presenting in person, like we've been doing this online. So if you're online, I hope that you got to take a few minutes and connect with your contacts. And those folks that are here in person, we'll do some more table talk for you too, so you can share amongst yourself. But I'm going to turn it back over to Courtney.
Thanks. All right, the next thing is to have, the next piece of the infrastructure puzzle is to have a plan for professional development and coaching. In this process, both of the ECSs and myself went through the practice-based coaching to be able to support their GSRP classroom teams. The leadership team as a whole does the pyramid model training together. So everyone on the leadership team and all of the classroom staff get the basis, the 5-day training of the pyramid model practices. Another piece of it is the leadership team looking at what's going to work for professional development to support the teachers to get where they want to be. In our county, we collectively at our top level leadership team decided that we are going to move towards more coaching-based PD next year. We know, and as I always laugh when I say this at these things, sit and gets don't really work. So as I talk to you in a large group, but we know that working with teachers more individually with their classroom coach, either from Head Start, if it's a coordinator, the mentor teacher, the education coordinator, or for GSRP, the early childhood specialist, it's better to meet with teachers kind of where they're at and have them create their own action steps and give them the PD that they need, more so than these large training events. That was one of the most, the best feedback that we got from staff members throughout the process, that really the bite-sized goals that they created with their ECS made it so much more attainable to get to implementation of this project. So we want to expand that to our entire county next year and really have focused intentional PD with their classroom coach. We're going to have a tier 1 universal expectation that each classroom teacher kind of reflects on, reflects on with their classroom coach, and then go into targeted PD as needed, but for the teacher, not everyone generally. I also wanted to mention that the TA guidebook of PD is available. Michelle has a QR code that we can hopefully share somehow to register for any of these trainings that you want at the state level. The next piece of the implementation puzzle is to develop procedures to address challenging behaviors, and I feel like this is where we've kind of excelled as a county, I think, to where we're at. Some important things to know, just for you to know, is we stand by the ratio of ECSs to classrooms that the state allows us to have is really too high for good classroom coaching. So we have our ECSs carry at most 10 classrooms that they work with, and in our county, our ECSs are the first line of defense if a child has challenging behavior. So if a child is experiencing, if the teacher's having any kind of issues with challenging behaviors in the classroom, the first thing that they would do is they complete what we call a request for classroom assistance form in Google, and that comes to the ECS team, and we kind of look at it and talk about what we do next. Then the next step in that process is the ECS will go out to the classroom teachers and request that the staff collect data on the behavior. So we use the BERS in our community, which we will talk about later, right? Yes. So they use the BERS to kind of really figure out where the challenging behavior is happening, what part of the day, what is happening, to find out the target behind it. We ask teachers to collect data for a certain number of weeks before we really will do anything more with that request for classroom assistance, because teachers will say they're just a mess all day long. Well, no, if you look at the data, it might just say they're really just a mess at large group. So maybe we need to think about large group instruction, so that's kind of the process for that. If the child continues to have challenging behaviors, we have them, the ECSs will bring them to what we're calling our student assistance team to be more in line with a K-12 world. So we have a SAT process where they come and we work specifically with a behavior coach to talk about tiered interventions, review data, and then the ECS will take that back to the classroom team, and we are going to implement the prevent, teach, and reinforce process, which is also part of the pyramid model practices moving forward countywide. So that's like a manualized process for responding to challenging behavior in the classroom. And then if necessary, it would move to some sort of behavior intervention plan. All of this happens before it would go to a special ed referral, and then if it's still not working, then we would refer to special ed if needed. But this is all done with ECS prior to that point. Right. And then the last piece of the infrastructure is really looking at the data to see how we're doing. Like, how do we know that we're really implementing with fidelity? So we look at things like the standards of quality. There's a TPOP measure that Stacy's going to talk about, our behavior incident reporting, and then we do staff and family surveys throughout the year to kind of look to see how we're doing and use that data to tell us what we should be doing next. All right, so we really are working on building the system to support the staff to be able to support the children. And then that way the children can reach their desired outcomes, which is why it's really more about doing all of these pieces of implementation, not just ending at saying, yes, we do the pyramid model practices in the classroom. It's really a bigger picture, a system that needs to be built to sustain it. And now I think it's Michelle. Oh, it's Stacy's turn.
Hi everyone, I'm Stacy. I'm an early childhood specialist with GSRP. Like with Courtney, I started this project 2 years ago. This will be our third school year going into this pyramid model practices. And let me just sell it to you. It's a phenomenal program. So if you're kind of tipsing back and forth on it, try it. It will work for you. So what I'm going to talk about is what this looks like in the classroom. So we've had Michelle gave us kind of like our little brief overview. Courtney talked about the systems that are in place. So now I'm going to talk about what this looks like in the classroom, what the teachers do to support their students with social emotional learning, and how I support the teachers in that social emotional learning as their coach. So Michelle did a really nice job of talking about the pyramid, so I'll just glance over this again. So when we look at this pyramid, that bottom piece is that effective workforce. So that's the implementation of the actual program, the PDs that go along with it, that leadership support. Having that big foundation is going to support the staff that are supporting these kiddos. So the way I kind of explain the pyramid to the teachers is that first bottom piece, those yellow pieces, those universal supports, that is things that you're doing in the classroom all the time to support all your kids in their social emotional growth and learning. That piece in the middle, that green piece, that secondary prevention, these kids might be a group of kids that are having the same social emotional challenge in the classroom. So you're looking at those kids as like a little group of kids. And then that top piece is like that kiddo that, he was probably in that group in that green section, but now, these things that we were working on in the prevention strategies, they just weren't working for him or her. So we're going to move on and kind of look at them individually and try to think about what else can we put in place, what needs to happen to prevent the behaviors, or how do we cope with the behavior when it does happen. So when we're looking at those universal promotion strategies, we're talking about relationships that you're building in the classroom. And these aren't just relationships between you and the kids. These are between the children together as a group of children. These are the connections you're building with your coach and your teacher, and these are the connections you're building with families as well, because families are the first foundation for these kiddos. So we want to make sure that the families are also supported in the process, because we know that if the kids are exhibiting behaviors in the classroom, most likely they're probably exhibiting them at home, and parents are struggling with those behaviors as well. And we also want to think about the high-quality learning environments that we're providing for the kids. We're not talking just about materials and, toys and things. We're talking about, are the children engaged in the activities that you're providing? Are you engaged with the children while you're providing those activities? Having those meaningful conversations. If those things are happening, there's a less likelihood of challenging behavior in the classroom. The little visual that's on the slide are some of our behavior expectations. They come right from that Be a Superstar poster that Courtney showed us. So we actually, all of our staff, we wear them on our lanyards all the time, so they're with us all the time. So if we're out in the hallway or we're out in the playground, we have our expectations right here with us, so that way when we need them, they're there. Here are some other ways that we use those universal supports in our classrooms. The first picture is in one of our classrooms in the block area. So the teacher has safe hands, quiet voice, and use your kind words in the block area. So those are just to help the kids, remind them of what the expectations are in that particular area. So we have that big poster, but maybe in the block area we don't need all of those expectations. Maybe we need to break it down a little bit for them so that way they know what is expected in that block area. The next picture is for lining up. So there's little feet on the floor with their picture on it. Teachers do this a little bit differently in every classroom, but the expectation is there. This is your spot, this is where we line up, and this is what you're expected to do when we're transitioning to go somewhere else. The next picture is just a picture of the hallway, so you can see there's a little bit of the behavior expectation poster off to the side of the fire extinguisher, and then there's also a little one that's hanging up above it, so that way I think it says safe feet or walking feet or something like that. So it's telling them this is what your expectation is in the hallway. Make sure you have your walking feet. Yes. And then the last picture is a large group expectation poster that we came up with. A lot of the teachers were having trouble figuring out like what expectations should we be teaching before our large group. So we came up with like the middle is like safe body, and then we have the listening ears, quiet voice, sit on the floor, watching eyes. We also made up a small group one too that they tape right to their small group tables. So it has the same expectations. We also allow them the flexibility to say, hey, we don't like these particular expectations. Can you switch them out for one of the other expectations that we already have? So they may say, well, I don't like the watching eyes. Can you switch it out for, safe feet or something like that? So we allow them that flexibility that they don't have to use this particular one, but this is our example of this is what has worked in some of our classrooms, but it may not work for all the classrooms and all the kiddos. Something else that's really important when we're talking about those behavior expectations is not just teaching the kids how to use them, teaching them the why of it, but acknowledging when they are using those behavior expectations. It's so important that we're pointing it out. We're using that positive descriptive feedback when we're pointing out the behaviors that they're using. Verbally, that might look something like, wow, Johnny, I saw you pick up all the blocks when you were done cleaning up. You are really caring for our classroom. So you're using that expectation of caring for the classroom. You're giving them the why. Why is that important? Well, you picked up the blocks, so no one trips and falls over your blocks when you move away, and you cared for our classroom. So these pictures show one of our classrooms use superheroes, and so the kiddos, when they're caught doing the behavior expectation, the teacher begins by modeling. So she has little Post-it notes, and she'll put what they did. So Johnny picked up the blocks, and then puts it on Johnny's picture. So each of the kids has their own superhero. They decorated themselves. They have the little picture on it, so it's their superhero. And when they're caught doing those behavior expectations, they have their acknowledgement right there. Then they progress into the kids can post them for other friends. So Johnny saw Susie pick up the blocks. So Johnny wrote a little heart maybe on his Post-it and put it on Susie's superhero. So it flows from here's what we're doing. Here's the teacher showing us that we're modeling this behavior, and then the kids go into doing it for themselves. And you can see the little quote from Thomas. He knows that, when all their friends, how we care for our classroom and follow the rules. He was one of our kiddos last year that really took to a lot of these supports that we put in the classroom. So we're going to talk next, we're going to go up that pyramid, we're going to go into that middle section, those secondary prevention strategies. So these, if you remember, when you think about these are for those small groups of kids that are struggling with some of the social emotional learning and some of the challenges in the classroom. So when you think about those, we know that all children need adult support sometimes, throughout the classroom, but sometimes kids need a little extra support, and this is what we're looking at. This is what we're thinking. We're thinking this small group of kids is having trouble with friendship skills. So we're going to work on friendship skills because this group of kids needs help entering a peer group or playing with a peer or asking for a turn. So we're going to look at those kind of things. And when we're looking at those things, we want to make sure we're starting to collect data. This is the point where the teachers are starting to come to me or to Chrissy and saying, hey, I have a couple kids that, they're having trouble with friendship skills, and we're just going to document this, and what other supports can you provide? So, a lot of our teachers are already trained, and they already have the tools for these Tier 2 strategies. This is what we call the Monroe Tier 2 strategies in the middle. So they're already trained. They already have resources in their classrooms. Chrissy and I have plethoras of resources to give them if they don't have what they need. So a lot of times they start taking the data, and they start these, strategies before we even know there's really a problem in the classroom. But sometimes they come to us and they say, hey, we don't have something that helps with friendship skills. Can you help us out? So this is kind of where we are, really starting to pinpoint. So some of these strategies that we have in place in our classrooms, and like I said, the teachers do these automatically. So the first little picture is a little superhero cape. A lot of our teachers have these in their classrooms, and they use them a little bit differently. This classroom uses it as a way to do problem solving. So the superhero of the day gets to be the one that carries around the problem solving toolkit, and when friends have a problem, they go to the super friend and they say, I have a problem, can you please help me? And so then they go and they solve the problem, and the kid kind of coaches it. But again, we start with the teachers are modeling this. The teacher wears the super cape. The teacher is the super friend. The teacher comes and helps with the problem solving. And then we move into the peer. It's peer to peer. Tucker the Turtle, Courtney talked a little bit about Tucker the Turtle. It's one of the strategies we use for self-regulation. So typically, when we're thinking about these small groups of kids, we're not just doing a small group teaching activity. It could be a small group activity, but things like Tucker the Turtle, it's a great social story that can be shared throughout the entire classroom. So some of these strategies are whole group, and we know that not all the kids really need this strategy, but those kids that don't need it can support the kids that do need this strategy. So it's not just thinking about, okay, I'm going to pull this small group of kids and work with them. No, some of these things we do as a whole class and try to support those kids. The other little picture, it's a little small, but it's our feelings chart. So typically in the morning at some point, the kids will come in, they'll take their little popsicle stick, has their little face on it, and they'll find whatever feeling they're feeling of the day. Sometimes the kids will come to the teachers and say, oh my goodness, I'm feeling so sad today, I don't know why. And the teachers are ready. They're ready for this because they've prepared, and it's a good in-the-moment opportunity to teach about those feelings and what we can do about those feelings and how we can support the kids with those. And the last picture is the problem-solving steps. This is a great visual. The kids really love this visual, and so do the teachers, because it's really simple. It's 4 steps to solving a problem. What's my problem? What's my idea? How am I going to solve it? And then, did it work? And if it didn't work, then we go back to the drawing board and we start over again, and it's just a cycle of that problem solving. So again, we know that all children need support with social emotional, and just looking at those small groups of kiddos that might need the extra support and those extra visuals or the extra teaching and learning opportunities around social emotional learning. The biggest piece to this too is making sure the families are connected. When you start to get to these Tier 2 strategies, you really want to make sure that your teachers are getting in contact with the parents. Hey, Johnny's having this thing going on in class, do you see this at home? What do you do that helps support them? What can we do that would help support them? What supports do you need? What else can you help us with? And kind of using them as a gauge on how we're going to really support those kiddos in the classroom. The other really big piece, and this doesn't just generally relate to Tier 2 strategies, it relates to all your strategies you're putting in place. Use it every single day. The classrooms that use it every day, we see the most benefit out of. If you're using it every day, you're breaking it down, you're embedding it into everything that you do in the classroom, it is effective. So that's the most important piece. If this is the only thing you take away today, use it every single day throughout the day. Yes?
So there was a question online.
Okay.
They say Waverly will be having an inclusive 3-year-old room this year. I'm hoping to implement Solution Suitcase and Tucker the Turtle this year with them. Any suggestions for this young classroom?
First, my suggestion would be take it small pieces at a time. So you're going to want to do one thing at a time. So if you want to take Tucker the Turtle, or if you see that your classroom is they need more problem-solving skills, then start in that direction. It just depends on where the kids are and what they need. But definitely, making sure that you're reading that story aloud. Like if you're using Tucker the Turtle, read that story aloud to the whole group. Read it in a small group again. Read it to them, during choice time. Pull it out. A lot of our teachers, and you'll see this in a couple of slides ahead, they have them in their safe spot. So their place where they call them cozy cubes, calm down. They call them all different things. But it's in there too. And there's visuals that go with that Tucker the Turtle that kind of help them go through those steps that Tucker the Turtle goes through. Oh, I'm mad, so I'm going to tuck in my shell. I'm going to take my 3 deep breaths. I'm going to pop out. Do I feel better? Yes or no? If not, I go back. I go back in my shell and I start over. So, and with the Solutions Toolkit, walking through those 4 steps first is really helpful. And with the little Solution Toolkit, making sure that you have those available in your classroom. So in our classrooms, a lot of them have like 3 or 4 sets of them. So they have them in their main areas where there's problems occurring. So block area we know is a problematic area a lot of the times. Sharing is really hard in the blocks. Sharing is really hard in dramatic play because everyone wants to dress up, everyone wants the baby dolls. So just taking it step by step, making sure you're modeling it, and then letting them kind of take over that ownership of doing that skill.
And then it was P.S. They love the superhero wall.
The superhero wall is very popular. A couple of the other classrooms have taken it on after this classroom started it.
And sharing that stuff with families.
Yes, and also making sure that you're sharing the supports you're using in the classrooms with families. So if you're using Tucker the Turtle, print Tucker the Turtle off and send it home. Say, hey, we read this social story in the classroom and we think it might be helpful at home. Send it home to all your families. There's, on NCPMI's website, there's a resource, there's classroom problem-solving toolkits, and there's also home problem-solving toolkits, too. So if you're using those toolkits with fidelity in your classroom, send the home ones home at home. Say, hey, we know problems happen at home, too. Here's a strategy you can use. When there's a problem, give them the toolkit, help them solve that problem. So it's really helpful to have that support from home to school. All right, so now we're going to take a look at that top part of the pyramid. This is our tertiary interventions. This is where Courtney had talked about our process of going through and collecting our data on these kiddos, because these are the kiddos that, we've done all the universal supports. We've done all the extra tier 2 supports for these groups of kids, and this kiddo is still just sticking out, and we don't know what we need to do. So this is the point where the teacher's like, hey, Stacy, I have no idea what to do with this kid. This kid's having, X, Y, and Z is going on. Here's the data I've collected. Here's what I think is going on. What else can we do? So with that, Christy and I will go into the classrooms. We'll collect our own data. So we use the BRRRRs. We also use a couple other tools you guys might be familiar with. We use ABC forms. We use scatter plots, BOSS forms, things like that to kind of collect a little bit more data. Scatter plots let us look at times of the day. BOSS forms let us look at attention in the classroom because there might be other things that are going on that we're not seeing on that BRRRRs form. So we use the BRRRRs as our main form, but then there's other things that we can do behind the scenes to collect that data to go with that. Once we've collected that data, we kind of try to pinpoint when is it happening, why is it happening, what is the trigger, and then we decide as a team. This is where this is so important that the coach and the classroom staff have this really good connection with one another because we are a team. It's not me saying, hey, this is what you need to do and this is going to fix it. It's sitting down and saying, here's the problem, here's when it's happening, here's what we think the trigger might be, what can we do to help this kiddo? What strategies do we want to put in place to help this kiddo get through X, Y, and Z? So that's kind of how we go through that plan. We can go into a behavior intervention plan if we need to. Sometimes we just start as just strategies. We take it to the team and we bring some strategies back and we try them. But other times we might go right into that behavior intervention plan. And depending on how that goes, it might end up rolling into a special ed referral. It just depends on the kid and the things that we've tried. So here are some of the things that we might put into place for our tier 3 strategies. So these are the individualized interventions that we're looking at. The first one is a play kitchen strip that tells us, it tells the kids, hey, here's the way you can play in the kitchen, and it gives the steps for them to play in the kitchen. And then the other one's an easel routine. I will be completely honest with you, some of the teachers that have had some of these things put in place as a tier 3 strategy kept them in their classroom as a universal support. So just kind of putting that out there that, it started as a tier 3 strategy, but it kind of works as a universal support too. So that's a little bonus right there. The next slide we're going to see, this is Miss Jackie. She's one of our teacher consultants. She brought in the play visuals, and she was working with a kiddo. and she taught him, she modeled with him, she worked with him during those play steps to try to play. I think they were playing with Mr. Potato Heads or something. So she walked him through the steps that are on those visuals. And then the next part of that is then the kids are using that visual together. They're supporting each other. We have one student supporting the other student that needs that support with those visuals. So they're using that visual together to make that play happen together. So in our classrooms, I kind of already talked about the safe place or the cozy cubes. We have these in all of our classrooms. They all look a little different. They all have different supports in them, but generally they're the same. They have little fidgets to help them calm down. Tucker the Turtle's in there. Some of them have those little posters that you can run your finger on to kind of breathing techniques. The poppets, the fidget spinners, things like that. Those are all in there. You can see Tucker the Turtle's visuals kind of in the back on the brick wall. So there's 4 little steps to kind of remind them of that social story and those steps in that social story. So this is where they go, and Adelaide tells us this is where we go when we're frustrated or we're tired or, we just need a minute to breathe, because we know that sometimes we need a minute to breathe too. So the other one is another example of a feelings check-in. So this one is just a little modified, simpler version. It just has 4 feelings on it. The other one had a lot more feelings. All right, I want you to take a few minutes because I just gave you a whole lot of stuff. So take a few minutes at your table and kind of talk about some children may need additional teaching support. How does that look in your program? What might your kids need at your site? So take a few minutes, talk about it, and then we can do a little share out. I have just the coaching. Did I talk too much?
No, perfect. Okay. No, good on. Just gotta stop talking.
right, we're going to give you 30 more seconds to kind of finish up your conversation. Okay, well, all the conversations have died. Does anyone have any questions about the pyramid first before we move on? Because I'm going to talk a little bit about coaching next. Just any quick questions before we move on to coaching? Okay. So the next part I'm going to talk about is practice-based coaching. We were trained by the TA Center to do practice-based coaching. This is what the model looks like. So if you look at that outer layer, that green layer, the collaborative partnerships, that is what I was talking about creating those connections with your teaching team. So as a coach, my biggest job is to build that connection with that teaching team so they feel comfortable coming to me when they need support. Because if they're not comfortable coming to you when they need support, things are going to go downhill in that classroom real fast. And then they're in their survival mode. So that's the biggest piece that I want you to take away from practice-based coaching is building that strong connection with your teaching team. Also, we are a little bit fortunate because we have our support staff on site. So all of my teacher consultants, all of my OTs, PTs, social workers, they all have an office right behind me. So I have those people at my fingertips. So for me, building those connections with those folks as well. So that way, if I don't know what to do to support my teachers, I have people that can help me get there without having to go through a formalized process. I just say, hey, Heather, how do I do this? I don't know what else to do. So if we take a look at the inner circle, the blue piece, that's where you're going to start with your classroom teachers. That is your starting point where you say, here's our data, and we'll talk about TPOT a little bit later with the data piece, but here's our data, here's our needs assessment. That's what we call it. The TPOT is our needs assessment. What do you need in the classroom? And this data piece shows exactly what the teachers need in their classroom, and then we build a goal around their need in the classroom. So then they write their own goal. I'm there to support them. I'm not picking their goal. If I pick their goal, they're not going to be successful in their goal. Like if I say, this is what you need, how does that feel? How does that feel to you when I say, that's what you need. I need you to do this in the classroom. No, it's all about them. What do they need? What are they seeing in that needs assessment? And what do they feel like they need support in the classroom? That's going to be their goal. The next piece is their focused observation. Once they work through that goal, they have their supports in place, they have their visuals, whatever they need from me. They say, hey, I think we're ready. I think we want you to watch and see. Do we have this skill? I'm not going to say mastered because we are not perfect. We are humans. We do not master things. We work on them continuously. So once we see that they are ready for this, their goal is almost there, we say, hey, I'm going to come in and I'm going to take a look. We talked about we were going to use the visual supports at small group time. I'm going to come in. I'm just going to watch for that beginning portion. Did you go over your visuals? Yes or no? Ready to move on? Perfect. So then we move to that next piece, that reflection and feedback. That's where I meet with the teaching team and I say, here's what I saw when I came in and observed. How do you feel about that? How do you feel, or do you feel ready to move on to a new goal? Do you feel like you need more time? Do we need to revise the goal? So that's kind of where that goes. And then it goes back to that blue part. It's like a continuous circle. So they may not be ready. Then we revise the goal. We add more action steps to the goal. No big deal. It's their goal. It's not mine. And then that inner piece is those pyramid model practices that kind of holds that whole wheel together. It's the support of that pyramid model practice. All right.
Well, thank you, Stacy and Courtney. I think they set us up. You saw how systems had to be put in place, really crucial having that procedures for dealing with challenging behavior, that piece, and then going through the practices, like it's more than just universal. The promotion is important, but really having that secondary or embedded strategies and then the tertiary or individualized strategies, like that's what makes it an MTSS system. That's what makes where all kids can be successful. And so this section takes a look at how do we know where we are in the journey of implementation. Like a lot of things we do in early childhood, because I come from an early childhood background, we do it, early childhood people have a lot of passion, but it's hard to like, where's that dipstick to say, are we really implementing? Are we okay to move and will teachers sustain it? And so this section, I'm going to take a look at it, and I am going to ask Stacy and Courtney to feel free to grab the mic, because you're not going to see Monroe's data, but you're going to see some data. And so I talked a little bit about why it's important, but it's important because we're trying to get to a change in adult behavior, which we know that's really hard. I've been married for 30 years. I can tell you for 30 years that's been really hard. But the why is important for like doing this process, but the why is important for really taking a step and using data to help you implement more efficiently and effectively. So we want to make sure that you understand that we're looking, that word fidelity just means as it was intended. And we're looking also to connect to Michigan's continuous improvement cycle. So you'll see we use data in a way where we're collecting it, we're analyzing it, we're problem solving around it. And we're using the questions that you see on the screen, like where are we finding opportunities to improve or to support in a better way? So one of the ways we look is we look at our implementation. And so we're looking in two places. We're looking at that leadership team that Courtney talked about, like how are they building those structures that support that classroom? And then we also are going to be looking at some other implementation data. But this first one is called benchmarks of quality. We refer to it as the BOQ. And what it does is it takes that wheel that you saw earlier with the 7 components, the staff buy-in, the family engagement, the program-wide expectations, all of those, and it asks 41 questions like that would indicate things are fully in place, partially in place, or not yet started. And so the team utilizes that. They take it as a baseline, they take it mid-year, they take it at the end of the year, but they're looking at growth because they want to get to have 80% fully in place from that early childhood BOQ. And you're going to see here an example of a chart, a graph that comes when you do the benchmarks of quality, which you're seeing results from 2 administrations. The blue is a baseline administration, and you're seeing 7 red bars. You're only seeing 4 blue. The other 3 areas were not yet started for this team, and that's pretty normal when teams get started, that there's not a lot of infrastructure to support classrooms around challenging behavior. And so the red shows growth of things that are put in place for that. And I'm looking, that's a year growth, so you're looking from August to June. And that's because they meet monthly for at least 1 hour, and they're really looking at this data, this benchmarks of quality, and saying, hey, we're only partially in place here. What are some strategies we can do as a program that we can put in place and that we can record in our implementation plan? Another way that we're looking at implementation data is we use, and I think Stacy used this word, TPOT. It's a Teaching Pyramid Observation Tool. And it's a tool that our classroom coaches go in and they administer it in the classroom. Takes about 2 hours. Then there's a 15-minute interview so the teaching team can provide more information that maybe wasn't seen in that 2-hour context. And it looks at key factors, key practices from the pyramid model practices to see if they're evident in place. And that is considered our strengths and need assessment for the classroom teams. They take a look at that as well as their own thoughts about their implementation, and that really helps inform that shared goal that Stacy just talked about. Because if it came back and it was looking at schedules, routines, transitions, let's say it was a brand new teacher, and those things weren't really in place, that might be a spot that they indicate like, hey, Stacy, what are some strategies I can do about transitions? It seems like every time I go somewhere, kids are running around like their pants are on fire. You know, like, so this really helps drive that implementation being put in place. And this is what a graph looks like from that teapot spreadsheet. You're seeing a program summary. You're seeing the blue is the baseline, and then the red is the end of the year or spring one. So the blue baseline lets us know, like, hey, where are we when we got started? And most of Michigan's early childhood preschool classrooms are really strong. We have some strong models out there. So you're seeing lots of blue. Where you're seeing it, the second to the last, where it's really short, those are like, how do we respond to challenging behavior? It's really an indicator of whether the system that teaching team is working in has created these procedures. This is pretty common across the board. This is not Monroe's data. They kind of worked on this because they have such a strong relationship with their itinerant staff to support them. But normally that second to the last one, you might see that it's not yet in place. And then we also look at impact data. So we're looking at BER data, which is Behavior Incidents Report. Stacy talked a lot about that, but we're really looking to collect data on like the incident. Was it with the teacher and child or child and child? Where did it take place? Is there a frequency of it happening? What behaviors? Is it physical aggression? Is it elopement? What could be the possible motivation? So this BER collection, or the BER incident report, behavior incident report, tends to be a game changer for early childhood programs because it provides information where you can make like a precise statement if it's over time of what you think is happening, and then you can problem solve. But if somebody comes to me and says, hey, all day this kid is doing this, it's really hard to pinpoint and start to problem solve. And so you see that here. Somebody says, we have a major behavior problem. It's very different than if I could say, hey, there was 32 incidents of physical aggression in September across the programs. Most of them occurred during center time with peers. You see how it's starting to really narrow down so we can start to problem solve and support. You can do this program-wide, you can do this classroom-wide, and you can do this individual. There's reports for each. And so now we just covered systems, like the things the leadership team had to really put in place. You saw the practices that can support children through what Stacy talked about, which in order for them to happen, have to have that leadership team working on the infrastructure. I just finished up with some data pieces. I don't think we talked about the family or staff surveys, but we take that into consideration when we do data considerations, and we really look at that to continue to put things in place. For wrap-up, we have some teacher testimonials. I think everybody's has access to this. There's two testimonials, actually one's a parent, and you heard a coach testimonial when Stacy first got up here. She said, hey, if you're on that, if you don't know, you should do this, right? She said early childhood behavior intervention supports work. I can tell you Courtney is taking my baton. She is going to be coaching the system moving on. So that makes me think like she's a cheerleader as well. So you're seeing like, hey, a system can do this. I see two other sites of mine kind of out there. Would you say this was a positive piece for you, if you just wave your hand? Bay City and Heritage Southwest ISD. So normally when people have this kind of support, they can see how it impacts the teaching team and children and their families. So I thank these two brave souls for coming up with me today and presenting their lovely story. You can stay connected to the TA Center. All of the training that they mentioned that their team and teachers went through to be able to do early childhood PBIS or program-wide implementation of the pyramid model is going to be linked at the MiMTSS TA Center website. But we are going through a change. I think our new website comes up sometime early in August, but there's ways to stay connected to us. So if you're interested in signing up for some of this early childhood PBIS training, you can. And then we do have a data thing that's coming up at the end of the sessions today, Shane. Am I right? An evaluation piece? Okay.
We do have session evaluations at the end of each session for today and tomorrow. It's going to be the same link, and if you go into your pamphlet here on that first page, you'll see a QR code at the very bottom right. If you want to snap a photo of that or put your camera on it, it'll take you right to the link. There's a few questions that are all optional.
Thank you, Shane. And then we just want to finish up. There may be questions that you have, maybe specifically that Stacy or Courtney or I could answer. If you're online, you can put them in the chat. If you're in person, you can go to one of our stands. But we have a few minutes left for questions if you may have any. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming today to our session.
Michelle,
Yes.
online there was a question about a solution suitcase being referenced and wondering where people could get more information about that.
So the solution suitcase or any of the resources that you heard Stacy or Courtney and I talk about, you can go to challengingbehavior.org. And that is the NCPMI site, National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. And I just want to warn you, I know it's summer, but it would take you all summer to get through that website because there's so many wonderful, these guys are shaking their head like you can't go for an hour. But everything's free. Everything is meant for you to download and make it into your context. So problem solution suitcases for classrooms and homes can be found there.
And it's not tied to a specific curriculum, is that correct?
No.
Thank you.
It really, like some people might use some problem solving in their classroom that deals with what is the adult doing. This really attends to what can children do? How do they try out a solution to see if it works? What might they do? I do see our closing code for SCECHs or credit is up.
If you guys could join me in thanking this wonderful group for their presentation.
Thank you, Courtney and Stacy.